Picture this, an abandoned town, a population of only 5 and nothing left but a few buildings, merely a shell of what used to be. What did this place used to be like? What history lies within the walls of these oft-deteriorating buildings? History is weird. A whole lot of our attention usually goes to highlighting things that had a big impact on the world, while other things often get left in obscurity and, well, then it becomes much harder to find fair facts. This video is about just that. At its core, Amboy is what's known as a ghost town, and it's located in San Bernardino County, California, in the middle of the Mojave Desert. While Amboy still exists today, it is a fraction of what it used to be. If you were to drive into Amboy today, you might be surprised at what you find. An iconic cafe sign, some old tiny houses in a weird row, whatever. To understand how this shell of a town came to be, we need to go back. Way back, way back to the times when centuries were counted not in 20s, but in teens. Or actually before, because while this is not usually part of the story, the land on which Amboy is now located was the land of indigenous peoples and was taken from them by American settlers. The first of these American settlers came in 1858, when this area was set up as a camp for workers of the nearby salt mines. The settlement remained just a settlement until 1883, when Lewis Kingman was establishing stops for the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad, and to create a pattern, wrote them in alphabetical order, starting with Amboy, then Bristol, then Cadiz, then Danby, then Edson, then Fenner, and well, you get the idea. There's actually a whole history behind Kingman and what led up to his establishment of Amboy, which I will probably address in a separate video. Amboy's establishment, as a predominantly railroad town, led to the eventual construction of a few buildings, including a school that was completed in 1903. The school had only 2 classrooms, provided 1st through 8th grades of schooling, and was built in the south part of town. The building was later moved across the street to where it still exists now. With the turn of the century came the advent and increased popularity of automobiles. People wanting to cross the country via car were now faced with the difficulty of finding a way to do so in a pre-highway era. Consequently, this began to create a natural road system across the US, which often manifested itself in literal dirt roads just popping up along old trails that often followed train tracks. This included the Santa Fe Railroad, which followed the same tracks that Lewis Kingman had established them as nearly 2 decades prior. Though seemingly insignificant, this became a crucial moment in Amboy's history, and frankly the biggest reason that Amboy became the town that it did. With automobile use skyrocketing and this system of trails appearing, it was only a matter of time before some effort would be made to formally establish a system of roads in the area. This is exactly what happened with the 1912 creation of the National Old Trails Road Association, that sought to create a national coast-connecting road off of existing trails. 2 years later, in 1914, the National Trails Highway was outlined from these existing trails and included the trail going through Amboy. While not really a road at this point, but more a dirt path, and not even the first road to connect both coasts, Amboy was now officially on one of the longest roads in America at the time. Progress on the town continued, with a runway being built in 1925. The next big change would come the very next year in 1926, when the National Trails Highway became US Route 66, an official US highway. Pavement of the road began, and people driving the so nicknamed Main Street of America would always drive through Amboy, increasing the town's notability in a major way. According to Amboy's official website, by the 1930s, Amboy had 13 businesses, 3 service stations, 2 cafes, 3 motor courts, 4 garages, a post office, a church, and a school. Amboy, it seems, was bigger than ever, and it was about to get bigger. It is now that I may introduce the most important characters in this story, Roy and Velma Crowell, along with their daughter Betty Crowell, who would marry Herman Burris, better known as Buster. Roy and Velma had first stumbled upon Amboy in 1924 when their car stranded them there, and with no money, had to work jobs at local businesses to pay to fix their broken car. In 1938, Roy Crowell opened Roy's Garage. This was soon renamed to Roy's Garage and Cafe when a storage area built by Buster was redone into a cafe. The business was then renamed to Roy's Motel&CAFE upon the construction of 5 bungalow-style rooms. While business would not reach its height until after the end of the Great Depression and World War II, the area still saw significant traffic due to the scarcity of rest stops along that deserted stretch of Route 66, and by 1940, the town had a population of 60. After World War II finally ended in 1945, the town saw a huge economic revitalization from the increase of car manufacturing and tourism. Roy's continued to be operated by Roy and Velma, with Buster Burris becoming quite involved in the town's operations, reportedly building much of the infrastructure himself, including finally bringing electricity to the town. Some reports say that this revitalization brought the town's population back up to a staggering 700, 70 of which were employees of Roy's. Growth continued with the Catholic church, St. Raymond's, being constructed in 1950. In 1959, Roy and Velma Crowell finally retired, having seen the town's evolution over almost 3 decades. Ownership and operations of Roy's moved to their daughter and son-in-law, Betty and Buster respectively. That same year, 2 now famous additions to Amboy, and specifically Roy's, were made. First, the iconic Roy's Motel&CAFE sign was constructed, which is today one of the area's most famous and landmark sites. The sign is the relic of the mid-century Googie architectural movement. Second, a new similarly styled motel lobby was built, which by now also included a 2-story, 20-room motel building, which still exists today. 1965 also saw the construction of a new post office building, which also remains today. Despite the 60s treating Amboy well, the beginning of the end was in store, as it was sometime thereafter announced that the construction of a new highway, a replacement of Route 66, would not travel through Amboy. In 1972, as a part of the Dwight D. Eisenhower Interstate Highway System, the California branch of Interstate 40 was completed, after nearly 2 decades of planning, and as previously mentioned, it did not pass through Amboy. The opening of I-40 was a major blow to Amboy, and it caused an immediate and drastic drop in business that led to the town's decline and a massive drop in population. Route 66 would go on to be officially decommissioned in 1985. A mere 3 years after I-40's opening, Amboy was put up for sale, but was unable to find a seller. In a small spot of good news, 1986 saw the first commercial use of Amboy as a shooting location, for the movie The Hitcher. By 1990, the population was down to just about 20 people, though 1993 again saw the use of the area as a shooting location. These films caught the eye of Timothy White, a photographer, who struck a deal with Buster to lease the town with the idea of keeping it as a beat-down nostalgic filming area, and appointed Walt Wilson to take care of the area. In 1999, the Amboy School would finally close its doors, one of the last facets of the original town still operating. In February of 2000, White would fully purchase the town for $710,000. Buster died shortly thereafter in August of the same year, having been one of the most instrumental people to the town's glory days and eventual decline. In the early 2000s, Amboy, and specifically Roy's, was used in the filming of music videos, as much of the town fell into disrepair. The property was eventually foreclosed and ownership went to Buster's widow, Bessie Burris, who put it up for sale. According to Bessie, most of the prospective buyers wanted to demolish the area or use it for other purposes. It appears that the interstate system and America had forgotten about Amboy. Like I said at the beginning, history is weird. What stays in our collective memories and what does not is often at the whim of fate. And Amboy, it appears, got lucky. In a bizarre twist of fate, a preservationist approached Bessie with an offer. His name was Albert Okura. Okura, a fan of Route 66 and owner of the Juan Pollo food chain, purchased Amboy in 2005 for a reported $425,000, with the condition to reopen and restore the facilities. At least an additional $100,000 were spent on this renovation in the first 2 years alone, likely caused by the need to replace a lot of this old infrastructure that didn't live up to modern safety and building codes. While the site is still used for filming, it is now maintained with the purpose of keeping it as it looked in the 50s. The population, reported in 2000 as 5, and now down to just 4 as of 2015, maintains Roy's as a gift shop and gas station, and continues to staff the post office. The motel, school, church, and bungalow rooms, as well as a variety of other buildings, remain abandoned and in different states of disrepair. In 2019, the lighting on the iconic Roy sign was finally fixed, and events such as aviation and motorcycle gatherings are now regularly held in the area. And according again to Amboy's official website, Okura has plans to eventually reopen the cafe and motel as operational. The portion of Route 66 that goes through Amboy is still open and being preserved by the county as historic Route 66, which many of its over 80-year-old timber bridges now having weight limits to avoid collapses. This section of Route 66 is thus still accessible by car and is oft-traveled by tourists and fans seeking to experience what a drive on Route 66 would have been like during its glory days. An aerial view of the town gives us a better look at what still remains today. North, we can see the old airstrip, which is still used for aviation events, the abandoned school, and a few assorted buildings. South, we can see the post office, the abandoned church, and a group of other assorted buildings. There's an old story that Burris himself demolished the majority of the buildings that had existed in Amboy after the opening of I-40. So that's probably a big reason why Amboy appears so insufficient to have at one point housed 700 people. There is also a random lion statue in the middle of nowhere to which I have no explanation. And the old salt mines in a crater are still within close proximity of Amboy. Looking to the future, no one can truly know what is coming for Amboy. But if Okura is able to continue with his preservationist efforts, I would bet that there's not a lot to fear. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. This project took astronomically longer than expected, but I am glad that it is finally done. I hope that you enjoy this piece of history, and I look forward to doing more things like this in the future. Please subscribe if you enjoy this at all, and remember to turn on notifications so that you can actually find out when new videos come out. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this, and if you have any ideas for future videos. Lastly, I want to give a huge thanks to everyone who made this video possible. Normally I would say that I guess this is hello, but I guess in this case, it's goodbye. For now.